Melissa, it's all yours.
All right, I will share my screen here in a second. Okay, so you guys can see all my folders, sorry. Okay, is that okay? Can everybody see that?
It's perfect.
Okay. So thanks for inviting me here. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm a huge fan of Gerard and of the Wind Challenge. And I think my understanding of what this series was going to be was just kind of to check in with artists that had been Wind Challenge exhibition artists and see where they are now, what they've done. Because I think, right, Gerard, you're picking people from many years. Like I'm from last 2 years ago, but you have some from farther back and some.
Correct. We're going all the way to the 80s and 90s too. Yeah.
So clearly other people will have done more things than I have in 2 years, but I'm happy to share. My last 2 years have been pretty busy though. So I do have a lot to share. So I wanted to just note that being a Wind Challenge artist was so wonderful because it was the first time that I have it here, and I know you're not supposed to read your PowerPoint presentations, but I felt trusted. Like they said, we trust that in a year, you're just gonna have something cool to show. And no one had ever done that for me before the Wind Challenge, to just sort of have that year to think about what I wanted to make and actually make it. And then the support to actually realize the exhibition. It was a wonderful experience that was a gift. And so I really am grateful for having had that experience. This was one of the pieces that was in the show that was made for the show. Yeah, it's rare that you get that kind of opportunity. So.
And can I say something about that? Because I feel, especially with your exhibition, that it was more like an invitation to your living room almost. Like it was really an installation, and Melissa invited you to come and experience something very personal and beautiful as well. And I still think about that show because there were so many components of that, but I'm gonna give it to you. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you. And I appreciate that very much. So thank you. And there were a few people that really helped make that happen. Chelsea's on here. I see Silas and Gerard. You guys were with me working, installing. These were some of the pieces from that show, just to give an idea of where I was at that time and in relation to some of the stuff that I'll show that I'm working on now. So, so yeah, I really loved that experience. At the same time, I was working with this body of work that's ongoing as well. They're called memory pairings. So I am continuing this body of work, and some of them are going to go to San Francisco for an exhibition next week, actually. So this group is about found objects, which is a big part of my practice, finding things. I just found a really cool metal, like crowbar thing on the road yesterday. And then sort of like holding on to things for different amounts of time that eventually find their partners, or like a buddy. So it's about relationships and collective history, collective memory. I feel like sometimes there are, and careful looking. I think it's about careful looking, because you can see something, you can see like a missing piece in another object. So that's kind of what this series is about. And I just have a couple of those as examples. So this body of work is ongoing. And then the more larger part of my practice is based on family archives, as the work at Fleisher was. This is an older work, but it shows where the collage kind of started with these images of my ancestors. I say this story because a lot of them, my Indian family we only saw occasionally when we were able to go there. But we would hear the stories about them. It was pre-internet, and, you know, so other than like long distance phone calls, which were rare, and, you know, actually seeing them, then everything we heard were secondhand like stories. So that's why I kind of compare them, or just at least make them as a complement to like stories from the Bible, or like fairy tales that you hear, and you hear these stories and you know these people and you know these characters, but they're mostly like from stories. And so I keep working with these images because I've known these characters for so long, but these are actually my family. So I've continued to to experiment with different media as I like work through these images. So these are some more pictures of my grandparents. I was at a residency in Brooklyn called at the Textile Arts Center, which was also a nice experience because they give you 3 months to just experiment and to play. Sometimes we forget about being an important part of being an artist is like, just discovery that happens when you get the opportunity to play and experiment. So that's where these kind of came from. And it's important because they got me to this part of my practice where I've sort of settled for the last year, just working with the same images, but in felt. And working with wool has been a big game changer for me because it creates a substrate for the image at the same time that it's creating the image. So I don't have to worry about putting things on things. The image is the thing. And when you're making art, you're making all these decisions about what things mean and why you're using what you're using. And so it's important to think about sometimes, like if you're going to put an image on something, what are the implications of that? So for me, like as someone who thinks of themselves as an object maker, it's important for me to know that like I'm making the object and that the image is fused to the object. So they're not separated. I remember hearing a story about porcelain, like the ancient porcelain that they used to make in China, and it was really secretive. So they wouldn't let anybody come to the mainland to like actually get it. People would have to wait in the boats, and they would bring the porcelain that they ordered to them so that they couldn't get the secrets about how they were making it and doing the glazes. So by the time they sort of figured out a way to do porcelain in France, you could always tell it was different if you broke it, because the European porcelain, if you break it, you can see a layer between the glaze and the clay. But with the Chinese porcelain, they were fused together and you couldn't tell the difference. So I don't know, it was like really stuck with me, this idea of things being fused together versus separate. So for me, it was a cool discovery to know that I could do that. And I work with both sides of my family. My mom's side of the family is Irish Catholic from Pittsburgh. And these are the members of my family that like I got to see and interact with for my whole life. You know, these are the people that are like shaping me and like the voices in my head, and they're where we spend holidays, and they're what we, you know, how we spend our time. So, and I also have a very, I think about aunts in particular because I have 11 aunts, and each one has a different personality and relationship, but they all have a very, very specific role that they play in forming the relation, like the sort of the social order in our families. And so I think of like that role, and now that I am an aunt myself, even more so, I think of that role, like it's a quiet but important role. And so I love to think about that structure that happens, and sometimes quietly. So my aunts are often the topic of my work too.
Melissa, I want to ask you about maybe a little bit personal, but I think we both share something, which is we both come from biracial families, and I know that the duality of that, like it really pulls you from both sides. And can you tell me about how did that work in your family and how for yourself?
Yeah, sure. I think, I feel like that's a conversation that's happening a lot more now than it did when we were little. So I'm thrilled to see it more. Like this image on the left of Thanksgiving, like I just never saw images that had like white people and brown people in them. Like not in media, not in TV shows, not in like you just don't see them. Like if you're gonna buy like a board game or I don't know, anything that has a family, it's gonna be one or the other. It has historically. Partly I think as I get older and I learn more of the vocabulary around like race and critical race theory and just how important representation is and like things about model minority myths, and there's just so many layers of these structures that as a child I had no idea that, I'm like walking right through this spider web with no idea that I'm in it. And so it's been, a lot of this work is about sort of trying to have some sort of understanding. Like you make it because you're trying to understand it and you're trying to see it. So.
And also, what about, I know you work a lot from pictures and pictures of your dad's family. Did you knew all these players?
Yeah, I know most of the players actually. What's funny? I know all the players in the pictures that I use from my dad's family, but like from my mom's family, like this is my Aunt Jean and my mom, but my Aunt Francie, I didn't really know her. So like we have so many old slides from my mom's side of the family that are we look at and they're so great. But I don't know all of those people. On my dad's side, most of the people that I represent are people that I did know. So, yeah, it's like this one is on the left. I had my first birthday in India, and so this was like it's when you use felt, it gets like distorted, but it was a photo of my grandpa holding me and cutting the cake, and then on the side is my brother like looking over the table because he was always like right there in everybody's business. And then one of my aunts in the background. And then on the right, it was one of my aunts with my cousin Apu, who was like one of the cousins we were closest to when we were growing up. So.
Can we talk about the technique here?
Yeah.
How you present it, like, because I know you always work with textiles, and I know that you had some experience with that, but this is for me at least, this is a brand new way of looking at your work that I never saw before.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so glad. It was new for me. I discovered it in, I started working with it in March of 2020. I had seen somebody doing this technique of wet felting, not like to make an image, but just to make the fabric. And I saw it happen at the Textile Arts Center and was like, what's that? So I just kind of watched it happen. And then I asked later, like, if that was going to be part of our experience. And they said no, but that I could take a class if I wanted. But then COVID hit, so there was no class. I had signed up for it, but it got canceled. So then I just started watching YouTube videos about it and trying it out just to see what could happen. And it's been a deep dive kind of ever since, but I've learned a lot about it since now. Like I've started to research sort of the history of it as a material. It's it may be the oldest form of fabric or textile that exists. They used to use it to make like the outside of yurts, like in Turkey and in still in the Middle East, it's used a lot. And it's a communal practice, which I like very much. I make small ones, but if you're gonna make a rug or if you're gonna make something that goes around a building, you have to, it involves a lot of people working together. So there are people, and in some communities it was women that would make it, in other communities it would be men that would make it. So I think, you know, like that's a very interesting, anytime you get into craft, you have to talk about labor. And so the idea of, you know, how the history of this material is one that it's for shelter, it's for comfort, it can be garments, it can be, and it can be decorative. You know, they very early on were using them for decorative purposes as well. So I think like it just has so many implications to my work. My practice as a whole is interested in space and how different bodies are able to move through and occupy space. I'm just very interested in that, endlessly interested in how we can like move through space. And so that anything that, you know, deals with the body or how the body interacts with other spaces or other structures is interesting, or is part of what I care about. And so felt by being used for both things is really a meaningful material for me.
And that is so true what you're saying right now. And if you guys haven't seen Melissa's work, I really, maybe after this, you should go to her website and look at all of it, because Melissa creates space out of a flat piece of paper. She'll create space somehow. So that is such a good statement.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been nice to like have time to kind of like, COVID has been a time where, because I'm here and sort of on my own, I just have been working. This is like how I've gotten through COVID, is just making and making and making. Maybe partly as a distraction, or maybe because I finally had the time to focus on it, because I tend to keep a full social schedule and I couldn't do that for the last year. So so I had to find some other way to fill up my time. So I couldn't go to things or hang out with people. So I made more stuff. And my apartment was full of, until I brought a lot of it here to the gallery where I am now for the show, my apartment, I was just having felt everywhere. It was, I actually inhaled like a piece, like a little pieces of wool. I used to have a cat. My cat has passed away, so I don't have cat hair anymore. I have these wool nunus all over me and my clothes and my everything.
I love it.
Yeah, but it's a really cool process, because wool has this ability to there's scales on the wool fibers that when you wet them and like agitate them, they lock together and form a fabric. So it's a really simple process. It just takes time and energy, and you can have this fabric, and you don't have to kill the animals to get it, which is nice. A lot of the wool that I get from like local farms online, like, you know, on Etsy you can find, and sometimes they even send you like a picture of the sheep that the wool came from and stuff. It's nice. The last thing I'm going to share, I think, I can't totally remember what's in this PowerPoint. I apologize, but because I made it yesterday, or well, it's been ongoing. I've been doing a few talks this month, and I've been using different work for each one depending, but I can't remember, sorry. But this body of work is also thinking about space, and particularly like the small space of pockets. So I took this textile history class about, and one of the classes, she started to introduce pockets, and I just, that was it. I don't even remember anything else from the class, barely, except that I was like focusing in on pockets being political, in that they were policed. Everyone wasn't allowed to have them. Women's garments like didn't have pockets. They had to make special pockets that tied on and like would be in between layers of skirts and petticoats. And even today, there's like inequality in like the utility of pockets by gender. Men's jeans pockets are 1,000 times more functional than the pockets on a lot of women's clothing. And so I just think about pockets. I hadn't thought about pockets as being this sort of microcosm for larger political issues, but they really are. And so, so I've been thinking about that, and make these pockets are filled with cement. So, and then they're sewn shut, so they don't give access. But I started making some more pocket experiments and thinking about what pockets could be, and how they can hold all kinds of things, which ultimately led to this sort of new hybrid of felt and pockets. So it's like taking the medium that I'm using now and making sort of these conceptual pockets, and pockets inside of pockets, and right next to pockets, on top of pockets. But all of that to say, you know, they can be very specific. We can carry, it's not just the valuable things that we carry that with us. Sometimes it's just sentimental things or useful things, but just the idea that that they were forbidden for some people. For me, it was like, gave me something to explore. So, and that led to this video. And we don't have to watch the video, but I did include the video here, where I did a residency at BRIC, which is a media house in Brooklyn, and they have a residency with video. And so that also happened to coincide with COVID. So I was able to learn how to do some stop motion and some sound editing, and make a video that just thinks about pockets.
Is the video available? I mean, can we?
Yeah, it's here, but I don't know if people want to watch it. It's 4 minutes, and it's like a lot of people in here may have seen it, but I'm happy to play parts of it, or if you want to watch, start it.
I think we want to see it. Yes.
Okay. It gets loud in some spots, so I'm sorry. A little loud.
And when she found the moon, it was so delicate that she could barely walk on it.
Where it would make it look droopy if it would be a different size, but it doesn't because it has just that proportion that will give you the smoothest way a 70s alien model would ever sit on your face.
Art, I love art. Did you get that message? I'll take that.
It's a little, water comes out this straight, as it just goes, and then it goes, and then it goes.
Can we talk about this?
Yeah, so that's my 4-minute meditation or 4.5-minute meditation on pockets.
The one moment that really resonated with me was when the photographs were going between the two pockets. And I don't know, obviously art can be interpreted any way, you know, depending on the who's looking at it. But for me, it was that, you know, how people see something, especially brother, sister, they see something, but they remember that event so differently from each other. And I wonder, does that has anything to do with your piece? Or
Yeah, well, I was thinking about, I love that idea because it's really true, especially like they start to feel like they're being kind of passed back and forth, which is to me, like when we're doing that, when we're exchanging stories about them or remembering them together, we can kind of trade them back and forth. But I also think about like this idea of the way collective memory and collective history working, where it's like tucked away and we can take it out when we need it, or maybe it, you know, we don't control when we take it out. But you know, it's this thing that like is stored somewhere and then it comes out and then it can go back until it's called upon again. And so that's kind of how I envision it. But I also really like, especially because my siblings were really present in those images too. So you can like, and that actually, I had the idea for that to happen. So I had to build those pockets and I loved those pockets. So I thought that those pockets sort of on their own without the pictures could still hold sort of the emotion of what they were doing with the pictures, which is what led to make the other pockets that I had shown before.
well, because I did some homework on you, Melissa, I wanted to ask you about, I read somewhere that your father was crucial in your development as an artist. And actually, I believe maybe he encouraged you to be an artist. Is that right? Or
not quite. So my dad was an artist. I think it's funny. I think like my dad was a secret conceptual artist. He had like a secret like art practice. It wasn't so secret, but he didn't really understand his own practice, which is he was a surgeon, and this is the craziest story many of you will ever hear, unless you know us, and then you already heard it and you know it's crazy. When he would take out people's gallbladders, because he was a surgeon, before they left the emergency room, he would take the gallbladder and put it on a paper, either a drawing that he made of a landscape, or he would tear a picture out of a magazine. Like if he talked to the patient before and he knew they like dogs, he would take a picture from the waiting room of a dog, and he would put the gallbladder there, and he would use the OR camera to take a photograph with their gallbladder, with the dog, or their gallbladder in a hammock or on the beach. And then he would write their name and the date of their surgery, and then his name in calligraphy. And then he would give them this photograph as a memento. It's the weirdest thing ever. But
oh my God, no, I love it.
I love it.
Such a conceptual artist.
That's what I mean. But he didn't know. He thought that his art was, he would do portraits of people. He liked to do pastel portraits, which were fine. They were fine. But this other thing, it's he had, and not only did he do it, he did it for 20 some years. So he has an archive of thousands of them, which can never go anywhere because HIPAA, but they're the coolest. And I wish that practice could have been celebrated. But what he did for me, I think he was always making things, but my mom also was always making things. So we just had a very creative home. And because my mom was a crafter, there was always stuff. If you felt inclined to make something, there were things to make with, which was great. But my dad always thought art was something that you do on the side, that it's not something you do, that you could be. And so I think instrumental in me becoming an art teacher was dispelling that myth. I don't want that to be the story that people hear. It's not true. And no, you're not going to get a 9-to-5 job probably as an artist with a 401k and benefits, but you're not going to get any job with that anymore, to be honest. So you may as well do what you love and find a way to make it work. So.
And then your love for textiles, did that come from your mother? Did she started that kind of?
I think that's both. Both of my parents were quite fashionable. So they each had a very distinct fashion image. They each had a fashion sense. My dad's was very flashy. And so, anything shimmery, anything velvet, velour, gold, whatever, so, but also patterns in the Indian silks, in this piece here, anything. And I think that's why I do, I do lean, gravitate towards those types of, I work with Indian silks all the time. Because of that, because they were around. But I think it also maybe is why I textiles felt like a home for me. When I started studying textile design at FIT when I was in my 20s, it was oh, this is my medium. I had been painting and drawing and trying ceramics, and none of that ever felt the right fit. It's always if you're how if you do this the wrong way, it always feels weird. And then I don't know, the textiles were a really good fit. I have my sister to actually thank for that, because I was kind of I don't know what to do with my life. And she was why don't you look at this program at FIT that does textile design? And so we went to the information session, and the rest is history.
Thank you, sister. So your textiles, how do you find them? Do you look for them? How does it work?
So once I find them a lot. When I was working as a textile designer, my boss at that design studio would give me a lot of scraps. So I've had to constantly purge fabrics, because I always was given fabrics and making fabrics. I worked a lot as a screen printer. So I still have like some of those, but then with the silk, I work with these silk photographs now, which I take these in the photographs you were talking about, and I scan them and then print them onto Indian silk that you can, I get it in a roll from Dharma Trading Company, which is like anything silk you would ever need if you want to, if you want to try painting a bow tie, or if you want to, do handkerchiefs or beautiful like scarf, like they have anything silk you could ever want. But they also have silk backed with paper that can go through a large format inkjet printer. And I actually printed the roll I'm working with now. They come in 50-foot rolls. I printed this whole roll at the Philadelphia Photo Art Center, which I also love and would love to give a plug to because they're wonderful. So yeah, so that's what I work with. But then I also will find things. So I'm definitely a scavenger. But I did a project in Berlin that was based on grief, and I was specifically researching Victorian mourning fashion restrictions for women. So then I was working specifically with like black silks and like tough silks, because the mourning restrictions required that you use like these silks that were really hard to work with. They just wanted, I don't know, it was that's another conversation about kind of oppression and inequality in how women, when their husbands passed away, had to for a year not leave the house in full mourning with full with a veil, like a veil that would go to the floor. And then there were like these different like steps up. There was half mourning. You could like wear a shorter veil. You could introduce gray into your wardrobe. And so for that project, I was looking for specifically those fabrics.
There's actually one piece I actually want to talk to you about. It was in the Win Challenge show, which was the passport of your dad. That was, I believe it was screen printed or something into the text, into the fabric, right?
It was inkjet printed, yeah.
Okay. And I noticed that made an appearance again in some other works. And I want you to, if you could tell me a little bit about what is it that you're trying to convey with this?
Yeah, sure. So like, I wonder if I can go to the next slide. I'm not sure what it is, but we'll see. Okay, so we'll do that later. What that image was from is, I have a Tupperware full of photos that were, our house that we grew up in burned down in an electrical fire in like, maybe I want to say 2011 or 12. I can't remember exactly the date. Everybody was safe, but the house was not salvageable. And a lot of the photos from our childhood were gone, but there were, the insurance company, had cleaners come in and try to save what they could save. And the photos that were saved were like just a random group. They're not like, they weren't the best ones. They weren't like the ones that you would have kept if you could grab the ones you loved and like leave. Some of them were good. Like I'm so glad my dad's passport made it out, but like some of them are just really random. And I still work with those images too, because they're the ones that I have. Luckily, like, because my mom is one of 9 and my dad is one of 8, other pictures exist other than the ones that were in that house. So, I still have access to other images, but because I have this Tupperware, they smelled like smoke when I got them, and they were wrapped in like saran wrap, like in groups that some of them were still stuck together, like kind of melty. So that passport was in that box that I got, that was like the things that were saved. And I was interested in it specifically because I think about origin and like where we come from in ancestry, but also I thought about my dad like leaving India when he did, and never, there wasn't Skype and FaceTime and WhatsApp, and so how brave and like, but it's also lonely that might have been, and scary. But then also like the feminist, because I think about space as in being in a brown and femme body. I think about space from that perspective. The passport had a space like for a wife to be added to it, because the wife couldn't have their own passport. So then that, like, you know, I found that photo, and I've worked with that photo over and over. I did a project in my grad, my like sort of thesis show at PAFA. I had 3 of those passports printed on paper, that in the wife box, I did different interventions, just kind of thinking about what it means to have to like be added onto your father's or your husband's passport. Or like here in this country, it was the same, and you couldn't get credit, I think, until the 60s on your own. And so just like these ideas of dependency and agency, you know, so I think about it from a historical point of view, and his journey to here, to like the line to my present day, but also, you know, what it means. Again, it wouldn't have been his sister. None of his sisters are here, right?
Right.
Only he came. So.
But in a way, you're trying to experience life through him, you know, and like, how did it feel to be, you know, him? I'm leaving the country and being here lonely, like you're saying, you know, and trying to make it. That's really powerful. Anyway, I know that there's more to these presentations. So I'm gonna let you continue.
No, that's it. The only other thing I had is like, with, you know, the next thing coming up for me. Oops, I don't know how to go back. Can I go back? Oh yeah, the next thing's coming up. Or Friday, I have a show opening here, so I'm excited. I would love, you know, if anybody's able to come to New York in the next month and is vaccinated and wants to see the show, we'll be here. It's in Chinatown on Elizabeth Street. And I'm just really excited. It's like a dream come true that I never thought was going to happen. So that's happening. And then I have a couple of residencies coming up in the summer. So because the framework was like what's happened since Wind Challenge. These are some of the things that have happened to me since then.
So in that case, I can ask you many questions. Yeah. I
Yeah.
want to start with the found objects. Can we go back to that, you think? That slide, can we go back there?
Oh wait, let's see if I can do it. Was it these guys?
Yeah, those guys. So, I mean, to me, this is incredible that you're finding these objects because they look beautiful to me, just as they are. So how do you do it? Like, do you live with them for a while, I take it, and then one day you're like, this is what I'm gonna do with them, or this is how I'm gonna pair them. Is that how your process works?
Yeah, so sometimes it's so funny. I wish I had a different one. I wish I had put this one in here, because I had this piece of ceramic that a friend of mine made a sculpture, and he decided like he didn't want to keep the sculpture anymore, so he just like took a hammer to it and shattered it. And like the little pieces, I think actually I have one of them in one of the pockets. So yeah, see that like orangey, those little like ceramic things?
Yes.
This is a good one because I started to put some of my found objects in these little pockets because they were a good place to put them. So the ceramic pieces I hung on to for a while, and then I had already been keeping on the one on the right, if you see the tall, like skinny piece on the left that's wrapped in fabric, and the pink sort of one that's like arching this way. Those are scrap metal that I found like in over where the Crane Arts building is. They were doing a lot of construction. And then next to it is a piece of tempered glass that I found here in New York, because someone smashed a bus stop and window, and I was walking to work. And I just like it, that glass is so beautiful. It's like this thick. And so I was just like on the ground picking up pieces of glass like around, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I still haven't found, actually, that some of those pieces have been glued to fabric and like become parts, like sort of collages. So yeah, so I just kind of hang on to them, and then eventually like they'll have like a partner, like something will like make sense for them to be like paired with, and then they will become a thing together. So, and sometimes it's fabric and sometimes it's not. So yeah, like the one you the one on the left, that pink thing was at like it's called like Scrap, I think, out in California. I was doing a residency out there, and they have this place called like, don't know if it's called scrap or like, it's like a recycling center type thing. There's lots of random stuff and it's like by the pound, but you never know what they're gonna have or, so you just, but I had made that sculpture out of wood maybe a year before, but then, and I was drawn to the ceramic hand, like pink thing that I call a hand. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like the lid to something. I have no idea. It was just, I thought but then when I got it back to my studio, then it made sense that they wanted to be together. So.
So would you say you're a collector of memories?
Yeah, I think so. I think I describe myself in one of my artist statements recently as I'm a keeper of stories. I'm a story keeper. So there's stories in the objects for sure.
And in one of the interviews I read about you, they did mention that you do not include yourself, pictures of yourself in
Not usually. I did do a couple in this, like the birthday, this one, I'm in this one, as a baby. But no, I don't use, but actually in this show here, that is, there are 2 images that are me. So I'm starting to come in, but initially I never did. I was never in any of them. So it's,
have you ever done a self-portrait ever?
like not only these 2 pieces here.
Okay.
I would say, yeah. Because maybe that's a different conversation that I'm not ready to have, or I don't know the answers to.
Right, of course. You're creating the memories right now.
Right now, I'm like creating and responding and storing and keeping memories.
It just, I'm trying to imagine you going to work and you find this broken glass, and you stop and you saw beauty there. At the same time, you also saw a moment, because obviously someone broke it and there was some maybe violent moment. We don't know,
Right.
There's a story there. And is that what you saw when you?
I think what I think about these objects is whatever their history is before they are in front of me comes with them when I pick them up, So that's why I pick them up. I think because then from that, then they bring that to wherever they go from that point on. And you can, obviously these pairings are formal. I have formal thoughts for how I arrange them and pair them. But I think I like that they're not just, I don't know, that they do bring, it's like another, it's so hard to verbalize. I don't know why. I think because I work a lot intuitively, I am responding to, and it's like a conversation between the objects, and we're going back and forth to figure out what's a good arrangement. So
that makes sense to me completely. Yes. Well, I'm going to ask you then, I describe you as a multimedia artist because you really are. You really have exploring. I know you've done ceramics as well, and I know you do watercolors too. And can we talk about those other mediums that we haven't talked about yet? For example, watercolor. I know that plays a really big role, and you keep going back to it.
Yeah, watercolor is or ink. They're my safe. They're my meditative space, I think. And I think that they are for a lot of people. I don't know if it has to do with there's a resignation that's required to work with that medium, because it doesn't, you can certainly master it. I haven't, but you can, get a lot of control over how it works. But I kind of appreciate that I don't have to have, there's so many places that you're trying to have control, and like that's a place where for me, like I don't have to, but it still like allows for things to, you can still think through them. You can think about and ponder things like with that medium. So, there's like conversations with, I think a lot of things that come up in my work too are like dichotomies between like hard and soft, or there's heavy and light and hard and soft, and with the watercolor transparency and opacity, I think like those conversations of constantly happening where you have to, where you see them together, it forces you to kind of understand each one differently. And so, so I love watercolors for that. And yeah, I had to teach a class in watercolor. I was asked to teach a watercolor class at Holy Family there in Philadelphia. So it made me do some more research and think about them more. And I'm really glad that, like, it's another thing about how things just happen sometimes for like a reason where we, you know, why it's good to say yes to things, because you just don't know, you know, what it's going to be a stepping stone toward. I wasn't necessarily a watercolor artist, but I really, because of, you know, teaching the class now, they're really going to be a part of what I do. Like I think, Gerard, I mentioned this to you earlier, but I was showing the students different artists, and one of them was Irving Penn, who's actually a photographer, but also a painter. And it started a series that's ongoing for me. That's these sort of geometric stacking balance. So.
And I know with the other series called Voids that you are going into social justice, and these pieces are made with paper, right? And you're using inks to execute them. And can you just give me a brief explanation about them, so everyone, when they visit your website after this?
Yeah, I think, you know, I was trying to have a social practice, and, you know, fumbling forward through what that means with politics, and the politics of trying to represent bodies sometimes is too much to take on, especially as a young or like an emerging artist, and someone like me who hadn't done a lot of the work to understand. I was trying to find a way to comment on this issue of gun violence, and it became, for me, that by removing the bodies and just talking about the emptiness that was left behind, that was a way I could do it. Sorry, it's very.
It's okay, because you know what you did. What you're saying, you convey by taking the figures out of these settings. You really convey something beautiful that really resonated with me too, and I felt it. Like I really felt it, and I think it's an extremely powerful series that you should be very proud of, as well as the others. And you know, I'm just gonna say, because we only have a few more minutes, and I want to be able to open this to anyone that might have a question, not just me. If anyone has a question, Melissa is here to answer it. Please do so now.
Thanks everybody for coming and listening.
Hi, Melissa. How are you? So good to hear you. I wanted to go back to your video, and I was curious if you could elaborate a little more on the sound and how you paired the sound with the imagery and where that came from, please.
Yeah, I can just go back to the cover page of it, but so I have been collecting sounds too. I collect everything. So I would go on a walk every day through COVID, and I would record sounds that I would hear on my walks. So a lot of the background sounds are those, but then others are sounds from like videos that I have like had on my phone. Like, so like there are sound archives that are similar to the photo archives that I work with. And then I just collage or like mash them up with each other a little bit, but then pairing different ones to different things, that happens like sometimes the sound came first and other times that is less organized of a process. That was more of that was the learning part of this residency because I hadn't worked with sound before. So I don't know if that answered the limit.
It definitely did. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone? If there are no questions, we're gonna say goodnight because we are now at the time where everyone wants to eat, probably.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I know Melissa has a really long night ahead of herself. She's putting the show up. So congratulations, Melissa. It's been lovely having you here with me. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Gerard. I'm so grateful.
I just hope we can see each other soon, and all of you actually. I hope I can see everyone soon. Thank you for being here with us tonight. We have another one next Monday, same time. Please join us. Any questions for Melissa, please go to her website, contact her, buy her art, and support artists. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.